And welcome to today's Rocksmith developer stream. Very glad to be back with you all. It is a pretty nice Thursday here in the Bay Area. Today, very excited to let you know that our performer is going to be Chainbrain. We finally have Chainbrain on the stream with us. Also, we're going to hear from Andrew Levin a little bit. But for the first bit of the stream, if you've never been here, we might have some new people here. We like to talk about music. We like to listen to music, and we talk about kind of what interests us in music. For the past few months, maybe, we've had a lot of conversations about recording at home. We've talked about, what it's like to create songs, to work on music. Today, we're going to talk about some theory, and who better to do that than our guest for today, Greg Studley, senior musical content developer. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome. Practical theory, fretboard theory. We discussed how we wanted to talk about this because we haven't really done much theory in the chat for quite some time, and I think you narrowed it down to very practical, very beginner friendly, but also something that's going to be perpetually useful. Want to talk about the major scale.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fundamental aspect of music, and a lot of people just kind of take it for granted and go, oh yeah, it's a major scale. And then if you ask them what it is, they go, well, it's a major scale.
Right.
Well, how does it apply to music? Well, I don't know. It's a major scale. It's used. So we're going to see if we could dive in and answer some of those questions and actually kind of shine a light on why it is what it is and how it's used that way.
Sounds good. A little bit later in the stream, I want to let everybody know we are going to have some raffles. That's going to happen after this round of discussion about the major scale. And in the chat, you have UB Jurassic, that is our community manager in North Carolina. He's going to be helping running those raffles. And if you have any questions for Greg or myself, please tag UB Jurassic so that he can get those questions to us, and we can talk about your theory answers or anything else you want to talk about. But probably sticking mostly to the fretboard theory. So, Greg, as I hear it, you have a presentation.
I do. I made something all fancy for you.
And Dan, who is running the board, is also running this presentation for us. So if you hear, looks like the Chainbrain group has arrived. Welcome, welcome to all of you from Chainbrain's channel. If you missed it, we're talking about fretboard theory today, and Greg Studley here is our senior musical content developer, and he's going to discuss what makes up the major scale. So please take it away.
Thank you, Doug. I need to see it. Can I see it? Excellent. Cool. So, in short, the major scale is kind of this fundamental element that really ties all of music together. But a lot of people, again, just kind of accept it. So I wanted to dive into actually what it is, how it's used, and most importantly, how it's applied to our instrument. A lot of times you see it and it's kind of talked about in terms of notes, but I want to actually talk about it in terms of the fretboard. So the biggest question then is, what is the major scale? How do we define it? If you would, Dan. So the first thing you want to know about the major scale is it's purely a pattern of whole steps and half steps, where each whole step is equivalent to like a fret, and is equivalent to 2 frets, and each half step is equivalent to just 1 fret. So let's see if we can like take this and pan it out across the fretboard then. So if we were to start at the 3rd fret, you'd end up going first a whole step, then another whole step, then a half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, all the way across the fretboard. Now, it doesn't really matter what note you start on. It's still just going to be the same exact pattern. So if we were to take it here, we could start it off on like the note G. And if we did so, I'm just waiting to see like where we are in this. If we were to start off on G, you would end up with a G major scale. So that would put G on the 3rd fret. That would end up putting A on the 5th fret. It would end up putting B on the 7th. That would take you a half step to C, whole step to D, whole step to E, whole step to F sharp, and finally it would take you to a half step to get back to G. And that'd be your full whole half pattern. I see people are excited about theory. That's awesome. Is Doug excited about theory?
I'm always excited about theory.
I know. Yeah, you just tough this out. It's all good. So the idea being, this is like one major scale. But the thing to realize is that every single scale you're going to play is going to be the same pattern if it's a major scale. So if we were to take it like up a string, you'd end up starting on the note C, and you'd get a C major scale going across the entire set of the A string. But still, it's the same pattern. If you take it a string higher than that, you get an F major scale. So the idea being, it doesn't really matter what note you start on. If you think about this not as necessarily in a key, but if you just think about it like it's a pattern, then that pattern can just repeat from whatever note you want to start on. So let's take it like just back to the key of G then, because now we're going to talk about how this actually applies to the way we play. Because right now it's like, okay, we've got a scale, but how do we play that scale? Because we don't play scales across the fretboard. I mean, you can. I shouldn't say we don't. It is not the traditional chosen way to do it, but a lot of times people are going to take these scales and compact them, and they're going to put them into like a little box. And those are, our scale shapes that we use. So if we were to take this and try and squeeze it into a box at around the 2nd to 5th fret, we'd have to take all these notes and move them so they fit in the box. So you can really think about how that happens one by one. And a lot of people, when they see scale shapes, they just see it as this thing that someone told them to play. But what I'm hoping that this does is open your eyes to realize that this actually becomes this shape because we move the same notes into different places. Now you could take that same shape and you could expand it now, and you could actually make it so that shape becomes a 2-octave shape. So this is probably something, pretty similar to what a lot of you have seen before is, full 2-octave major scale shape. Any questions, Doug? I don't know if there's any questions from the chat as we're going. If there are, just like interrupt me and say, hey.
Sure. Well, I do want to say, back when you had the scales laid out across each of the strings, we had the G scale, the C scale, and so on. And those can all be, because the intervals are the same for a major scale, no matter where you start from, you could shift that down to the 2nd fret, to the 1st fret, to the open fret. As long as you stick with those intervals, that's the scale that will remain.
Exactly. Doesn't matter what string. It doesn't actually matter what fret you start on. As long as that whole half pattern is intact, you've got a major scale. There are other scales that use different patterns, but that is the essence of the major scale. And so, like you said, you could shift it up the neck, you could shift it down the neck. It's still going to work.
Actually, I do have a question from the chat. Relic522 says, why F sharp instead of F in the major scale?
Oh, great question. So in the G scale that we had going across the neck, we needed to have a whole step in between, or right after the note E, in order to keep our pattern intact. And so if we were to just go a half step, we would have ended up at the note F. But because we went a whole step, we actually skipped over the note F and went to the note F sharp. But this is actually a really good question, because this explains why certain scales have flats and sharps. If you remember when we had plotted out for C, there were no flats and no sharps, but it's just because when you do that pattern, you end up skipping over all the notes that are sharp or flat. When you end up taking the pattern and starting at the note G, that whole step jump actually makes you take the F sharp instead of the F.
And it should be pointed out that there, the whole F flat E sharp situation.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, as Doug points out, you do have to acknowledge that there are usually flats or sharps in between notes, and the exceptions being in between B and C, there is no flat or sharp note that exists in between, and in between E and F, there is no flat or sharp note that exists in between. So that's why we were at E, we had to skip over the note F, and then we arrived at the note F sharp. A lot of people, when they kind of visualize this idea, they think about a piano and where those, where the black keys are as opposed to the white keys. But the thing to realize when you're looking at the fretboard is that every note gets the same look. Every note gets the same amount of space. Everything's just a fret. Like if it's a C, it's a fret. If it's a D flat, it's a fret. They're all the same here. So just acknowledging where you do have notes that go in between and notes where you don't is a really good thing to understand, especially when you're kind of counting across the fretboard. So if we're picking up then where we left off, I'm kind of like looking over here for where I've got all this plotted. The next thing you want to look at is right now we're in the key of G, which is helpful. We realize we started at a G, but when you want to start looking at a scale in more of like a universal way, where you could say, well, what I'm about to think about could apply to any key that I want to, is you actually take these scales and you don't think about them necessarily as notes. You want to think about them as numbers. So the first thing to do when you want to numerically understand a scale is you want to label all of the roots first. And so in this case, we had all of our G's, and all those G's should now be labeled with an R to indicate the root. You could also call it the 1, but more often than not, people are going to call it the root. So all the G's have now been changed into R's. Now, if you keep that process going and you say, okay, well, A is my second note of my scale, so I'm going to make that into the number 2. And B is my third note, so I'm going to change all my B's into 3s. And you keep that process going, and now C becomes a 4, and then D becomes a 5, E becomes a 6, and the F sharp now becomes a 7. Now, the cool thing about looking at a scale this way is now it's not necessarily the key of G. It's just a scale with numbers. And you may have heard people say things like, hey, you need to, this scale has, a flat 7 in it. Well, now you can actually see where the 7 is. When you look at it purely as a numerical reference, then you can manipulate those numbers. And that's why this is really good to visualize things also in this manner. So if you were to take this now and say, okay, well, I've got the concept of a scale. Now, what is a major chord? Because we've heard of the major scale. Now I think we're kind of like, targeting exactly how it works. But what about a major chord? Why is a major scale and a major chord related at all? So the idea is to realize that a major chord is also just a pattern of things, just like a scale is. And that pattern is a root, a third, and a fifth. You take those 3 things together, you group them, you've got yourself a major chord. Am I going too fast, Doug?
Not for me.
Questions?
No, we're getting questions right now. Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. So this last bit is we're gonna try and take this and we're gonna extract a chord out of a scale shape. And it's actually pretty simple when you think about how to do it. You're only allowed to choose these 3 elements. You can choose a root, you can choose a third, and you can choose a fifth from each of the strings. So we don't really have much of a choice on the red string, which is the low E. So you got to take the root. On the next string, you have a third, a fourth, and a fifth. For the purposes of what we're building, we're going to say, okay, well, we could take the third or the fifth, but let's take the fifth. The next string, it's pretty simple. You don't really get a choice. You got to just take the root because it's the only one available. The next string, it's the same thing. You don't really have much of a choice because you have a 2, 3, and 4. So take the third. Next one, again, not much of a choice. Take the fifth. Again, not much of a choice on the last one. So take a root. And all of a sudden, just by choosing numerical values out of your scale, you've got yourself a chord. You've got yourself a major bar chord.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people, I know when I learned the major bar chord shape, I was just like, cool, somebody told me what to do. Now I can play a major bar chord. If you asked me what it was, I'd be like, I don't know. Somebody told me to put my fingers here. But the difference is now there's a reason why your fingers have moved there. You can do this with everything you learn.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you know starting at any of the starting points that you had on the you know going up and down the neck, the scale obviously applies as long as you're starting on that low E string. That scale is the same shape, so you can carry that bar chord up and down the fretboard, which is why it sounds good pretty much no matter where you are.
Yeah, as long as everything moves by the same distance, it's still a major chord. If you move some notes more than other notes, then all of a sudden you're kind of manipulating the distances between notes because you're not really keeping everything as uniform anymore. But yeah, just like the scale, as long as everything remains the same distance when it's moved up or down the neck, it remains intact.
Do have a question from Clutching Up. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Is it always a root and a third and a fifth?
Yes. Now that doesn't mean they're always in that order. Like if you notice, like the way we've built it, it goes from root to fifth. Like those are the lowest two notes. But when you collectively look at the notes, you've got a root, a third, and a fifth. If you were to add another note, or if you were to remove one of those notes, like if there were no thirds, you'd have a different kind of chord. If you were to add, a sixth in there, even one of them, all of a sudden the ID of the chord would change, because now you're not talking about just a root, a third, and a fifth. Now you got root, third, fifth, sixth. And now you've got a new kind of chord because you're adding a new note in. But that's why if you think about these as numbers, you realize everything right now, it's just a repeating root, third, and fifth in some order. And yes, anytime you add or remove a note, it becomes a new kind of chord.
Right, right. And you can play with inversions.
Totally.
So
yeah, we should talk about what inversions are then. You want to take it? You want to
no, please,
show off the
please,
expertise, Doug?
No, not at all. I'm here to ask questions, Greg. I'm not here to answer.
So the idea of inversions, it's kind of implied that if you have a major chord, that the root is the lowest note. And so right now in the image we have here, the root is the lowest note on the low E string. But an inversion means that the root is not the lowest note, but you still have the same combination of notes. So you could have a major chord where the fifth is the lowest note, and that would be considered an inversion of the major chord. You could also potentially have like the third on the bottom. But even if the third is the lowest note and you have still a root, third, and fifth scattered throughout the chord, it's still considered to be major, but it is now considered to be an inversion because the root is not at the bottom.
And you'll see a lot of those in a lot of the Weezer tunes. You'll see a lot of those like big chunky power chords that start on the fifth.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's actually it actually adds to the sound to actually give it kind of a heavier feel if you put the fifth at the bottom, because now you can kind of access that lower note in there. They're really useful, and a lot of times you'll see chords where they are transitioning. Like a really common one, like one of the, probably on guitar, one of the most common inverted chords is either a D over F sharp, which it doesn't say it's an inversion, but it means it's a D chord where the F sharp is the lowest note, and F sharp happens to be already one of the notes of the chord. So that's an inversion. Another really popular one that people probably know is G over B. Those two are probably the most common ones that we play as guitar players.
So how important are sort of getting to know, as far as like the weight of importance, in your opinion, Greg, getting to know the shapes of these scales or getting to know the intervals that make up the scales?
Depends what your end goal is.
Okay.
So if your end goal is, I want to play lots of songs, then it doesn't really matter. Because if your fingers go to the right spot at the right time and you play it well and you play it clean, you're good. But if your end goal is to understand what you're playing or to potentially write your own music, then this stuff actually is pretty important. To comprehend what you play means you could potentially play it in a different way than you maybe originally thought you could, because you understand how you can maybe take this group of notes and move it over here on the fretboard, and so you get more options. If you're writing music, theory is invaluable. If you're improvising, if what you want to do is become a really good soloist, same thing holds true, is knowing scales and chords and how those things interact is incredibly important. Which is why I really like diving into the theory of anything that I'm working on, so that, I can not only play it, but understand it. And when you understand it, you can manipulate it. You can kind of go your own way with it.
Go your own way. I've got some questions from the chat, if you're ready, Greg.
Oh, yeah.
Guitar Princess 2 asks, is there a difference between arpeggio scales and arpeggiating chords?
Good question. So an arpeggio.
Let's talk about what an arpeggio. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. So first, let's define for those who aren't familiar what an arpeggio is. An arpeggio in itself is a chord where the notes are played separately rather than together. So one could say, well, you can arpeggiate a chord, but you actually cannot arpeggiate a scale, because an arpeggio is the same notes as a chord. So to answer the question, probably the most direct way, you can only make an arpeggio of a chord, but you cannot make an arpeggio out of a scale.
All right, thank you, Greg. Dan Amrick asks, it's always the root. It's always the root and third and fifth for major chords. I think that was a statement. I think that was an answer to a question, not a question in its own. But he says it's always the root and third and fifth for major chords specifically.
That is correct. So okay. As we said, if any of those notes are manipulated, then the chord changes. So the prime example is, let's say you had a root and you had a fifth, but no third.
Yep.
Now that you would normally see as, for example, it would be called G5, which on guitar, we refer to all of those as power chords. So once you remove the third, you just get a power chord and you have a root and a fifth. In fact, if you look at the image and you just imagine the lowest two notes as your root and fifth, that's your power chord shape.
Yeah.
Now the other
that octave,
example,
you still got a power chord.
Yeah, you can still include an additional root, because again, you're not really adding a new note, you're just repeating a note. The other most common way that you would manipulate it is to say, well, what if you didn't have a third? What if you had a flat third?
Ooh.
And that's how you would come up with a minor chord. So every time you manipulate these notes, you end up with, a new definition of a chord, if you want to call it that.
So on the image that we have on the screen right now, if you flat that third, you're just moving it down 1 fret to the 3rd fret. And again, that should be a fairly familiar shape.
Exactly. Yeah. For a lot of people, that's already going to be a really familiar bar chord shape that they've played before. And again, there's now a reason behind why your fingers go to those locations. And that entire reasoning is based on, you take that one note, you want to make it a fret lower, and now it's a flat 3 instead of a 3. And now you've created, you could call it like the chord ID of a minor chord with a root, a flat third, and a fifth.
What about suspended chords, asks Orbiter Guitars.
Great question. So the idea of suspended chords is, and this is why you only see specific numbers with sus chords. So a lot of times when these are written in chord form, you would just see SUS to shorthand the suspended. And you always see the number either 2 or the number 4. You never see sus 6. Or if you do, someone might be confused, and you should ask them to look over what they handed you. But no, when I was younger, I was like, I could suss anything. It doesn't matter. And then I realized, no, you actually can't do that. And so what does suspended mean is the question then.
Yeah,
so,
this is suspended, not suspicious.
That is yes. If it's sus 6, it is suspicious. If it's sus 2, it's fine.
Yeah.
That was a good one, Doug. That was good.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dan. So ideally, what this means is a sus chord removes the 3. and replaces it with something else. Now, the reason it's called what it's called is because there's a suspension, which is when the 3 is removed, and then what's called the resolution, when oftentimes the 3 comes back. And that's the most common way, or at least I should say that's the way that the chord was originally used. And I'm talking hundreds of years ago. Now you can sit on a sus4 chord all day and it's fine. Nobody cares. All depends what kind of music you're doing, I guess.
Right.
But so the idea is you can have a sus2 chord, which would include a root, a second, and a fifth. Or you could have a sus4 chord, which would be a root, a fourth, and a fifth. And in both of those instances, you notice the 3 is gone. Now, if the 3's there, you got a whole different kind of chord. Because again, every specific sequence of numbers or notes, however you want to think about them, will create its own chord name. And so different sequences, the sus's have to either be third removed with a 2 in its place or third removed with a 4 in its place.
And just so everyone is aware, what typically, and this is all looking at Western sort of European theory, Western European scales that we're familiar with, and that a lot of rock music works with, a lot of guitar-based music works with. What typically is the musical purpose of a suspended chord?
To make people want to hear the next chord. Just
to
like that.
Strengthen the resolution.
It literally can add suspense to make the music move forward into the next chord. I mean, remember the basic idea of music at its core is tension and release.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, that is what music was built off of, and that is still how it exists today. So you could say in terms of those two things, a suspended chord is the tension, and when it resolves back into major, which it normally does, it can resolve into minor. I shouldn't say it only does major, but it normally resolves into major, and when it does, that is the release.
Cool. Thank you, Greg. And I've got one more question with maybe an answer. So Relic522 again asks, is there special notation for inverted major chords, or is it still G maj? And then Slithera says inversions would come in the form of G/B or G over D. No?
Yes, that is the most common method that is used, is to actually not really say this G is inverted, or to actually put the word inversion or something like that into it, but to instead say what note is taking the place of the root. Now, that being said, you could have a chord that is, for example, and this is also a common one, you could have A minor over G. Now, that G is not actually part of the A minor chord. It's just a note. So just because you see a chord that says, hey, it's this chord over this note, that doesn't actually mean that necessarily it's an inversion. It could just mean it's a chord over a note. So you kind of have to know enough of the chord structure to determine, hey, is this an inverted chord, or is this just a note that exists under a chord? And so you got to have enough of the theory in place to answer those kind of questions.
And what are the there's a specific name, I believe, for like the third and the fifth that let you know what type of chord you're in. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know the name of that?
But I don't know if college was a while ago, Doug. I mean, I've gotten every question till now. No, I'm not sure. I do understand, but if you know, then you should totally jump in and do this.
Well, I asked because I've forgotten, because college theory has been a while ago, but it's something along the lines of telling. It's like a broadcasting. It lets you know that you are in major. So if you just have the root and the fifth, you're not necessarily going to know if the key of the song as a whole is in a major or minor scale. But if you add that third or that minor third, it will indicate indicator notes. I don't know.
Maybe
I might have just made
I
up.
don't know that
It's
might have
possible I
been
just
one of
made
those
something up.
classes that I was late to, or that, you know, I was really tired and I might have
That's
slept
fine.
through that lecture. I don't
I'm
know.
sure someone in chat will let me know. Leading implied. Are those leading notes? I think those are more
Leading tones are normally, well, you could, I mean, now we're going to get into the deepness of it, but leading tones are oftentimes referred to as the sevenths, which are the notes that lead back into the root. But it could also, sometimes those leading tones are also thirds of other chords, which is why it can get kind of confusing at this point. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a definite term for that which you were referring to.
I'll look around after this and make sure I didn't just make that up. Jean 308 asks, I recently found out that the fifth is usually dropped from so-called jazz chords, including both the 6/9 chords and the 13 chords. Why is that?
Oh, very good point. Very good point. So when chords start adding what we call extensions, which are additional notes normally over the number 7. So you may have seen a chord that's called like C major 7, but then you also, as you pointed out, may have seen something called C6/9 or C major 9 or C13. You have to think about this in a way that a chord like that technically can have 5 to 6 notes in it. Now we only have 6 strings to work with. And a lot of times it's incredibly difficult to hit, for example, in a C6/9 chord, you would have to hit a root, third, fifth, sixth, and ninth. Now on a piano, just to kind of put into perspective, you can pretty easily play all those notes. You can even do it with one hand, probably. I mean, like it's not, I mean, you got to stretch, you know, to hit that ninth, but you can play all those notes. It's not overly complicated. On a guitar, that becomes really complex to figure out the right configuration to hit every single note. So a lot of times what we do is we reduce these chords and we think, okay, well, what are the essential elements? And a lot of times the cool thing is the name of the chord will tell you what those essential elements are. Here's what I mean. Let's take a C6/9 chord. First of all, is it major or minor? Even though it doesn't say that it's major, it is a major chord. It's kind of like saying a C chord. It implies it's a C major. So in this case, we say, okay, well, it's major. So we need to have a third because that's going to make it major. So we've got that note. Okay, now based upon the chord name, it's a 6/9 chord. So we need to have a 6 and we need to have a 9. Okay, so now we've got 3 out of our 6 strings already taken care of to hit those 3 notes. But now you can take it a step further and say, well, I do want to play a root. And in jazz, sometimes you don't. But in this instance, let's say, okay, you want to play a root. So now you got a C in the chord. Well, now you've got 4 notes already. And at this point, 4 notes is probably enough to define the chord.
Yeah.
If you start adding in more than that, you really start getting into very like complicated and uncomfortable and sometimes not very good sounding chord voicings on your instrument. But again, the name of the chord can oftentimes define what you can leave out. Now, let's just say an alternative chord, not that I can think that I've ever seen this one in a chart, or at least it's really rare. Let's say it was C6/9 flat 5. Just for argument's sake.
Yeah, it sounds tough.
It also sounds bad.
Okay.
So it sounds tough and not very good. Now the interesting thing is once you look at that chord, you go, oh, well, I guess the 5th matters now. Because someone just told me I have to flat the 5. So that flat 5 is actually an important note now. But before, when it was just C6/9, it was like, all right, well, there's a 5th. Whatever.
Somebody will probably take care of it.
Somebody else might play it, or it's not, or what I like to think about it is it's not a defining element of that chord. Everything else defines the chord, and that's given in its name. But the 5th doesn't seem to define it. Now, once you get that flat 5 in that chord, that is now a defining element of that chord, and you should, if you can, try to acknowledge it.
All right. Thank you, Greg. I think we have a few more minutes to talk to you. Did you still want to go over modes at all? Because I know that's a whole other.
Yeah,
It's a
I
whole
don't
other
know
thing.
how long is this stream, man?
It's usually about an hour. We're a
Yeah.
little over halfway through right now.
So
But I think you did want to discuss just very, very basically how modes function as far as the intervals starting with a major scale.
sure. Yeah, we can bridge into that. And if this seems to be a hot topic and a lot of people are, asking for it in the chat, we can certainly come back and dive into this in the same way.
Well, so far I've got all no modes and then yes modes. I love the modes. So it's pretty split.
Well, then half the people should go and take a break. No. So yeah, in short, the way you can think about modes is the major scale was defined as a pattern of whole steps and half steps. That was our definition that we used for it. Every mode is also a definition of whole steps and half steps. The way that you can ponder them is the major scale was, let's just say where it started. It started with whole, half, okay? Now, it'll always start with whole, half, every single time. But what if instead of starting on that first whole step, you decided to start a scale on the second whole step, kind of starting on the second note of the scale? Now, if you do that, you end up with a bit of a different pattern. It's still a pattern of whole steps and half steps. It's just displaced by one.
Just wrap that W.
Essentially, if you were to envision it on the fretboard, you would take the first whole step and you would just put it all the way at the end. That would be the kind of the visual aspect of doing this. And when you do, you end up with what would end up being whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step. And that's a mode. You've now taken the scale and reordered it to start from a different point. That becomes a mode of the major scale. You could displace it again, take the first note, put it at the end, or I should say the first interval and put it at the end. You got a different mode. Do it again, you get a different mode. So the major scale has 7 modes, or you could think about them as 7 starting places for the cycle of whole steps and half steps. It's a lot to comprehend because it's the same notes every time.
Yeah.
It's just in a different order, but that's what modes are. And sometimes, especially for soloing, it's better to think about these different mode options than to always think I'm in a major scale, because the major scale at a certain point becomes limiting, where
Right.
the modes let you start from any point you want to.
All right.
That's about as concise as modes can get.
That sounds great.
That's all I got.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Greg. Greg Studley, everyone. Again, you are a senior, I think you're a senior musical content developer here in the team. And yeah, so thank you very much for putting this together. Right now, we are going to have our first giveaway of the stream. So before that, say farewell to Greg. Hopefully, we will see you again very soon.
For sure.
All right. So for everybody else in the chat right now who is watching live, we are going to give away our first Ernie Ball prize pack of the stream. So if you're in the chat, please listen to UB Jurassic for your instructions on how you can win everything that you see here on your screen. You're going to get 2 sets of strings, 1 6-string set for your guitar, 1 4-string set for your bass. You're going to get a black Ernie Ball guitar strap. You're going to get a package of Ernie Ball picks, either medium or heavy medium, kind of depending on what I grab when I put these together. You're going to get a pick or 2 from us, the Spectrum Plectrum Rocksmith pick. You're going to get a package of Ernie Ball Wonder Wipes to keep your guitars, neck, body, and strings fresh, lasting longer, and a peg winder. All of that can be yours. Went into the studio earlier this week, sent out a new shipment is being sent out. So if you've won in the past few months, you weren't part of that first wave of prizes that went out, you should have your next prize pretty soon. I'll be going out there as often as I can to ship these out. It's become a bit more possible now. So yeah, these will be going out as soon as I'm able to get back into the studio. But we do ship internationally, so if you are not in the U.S. And you win, you'll get a whisper. Well, you'll get a whisper no matter where you are from EB Jurassic to get your name, your shipping address, and your telephone number. We do need all of that information in order to get your prize to you. So make sure you look for that whisper if you win and get that information back to us. And now I'm again extremely happy to finally welcome Chainbrain to this stream. He's going to play a couple songs for us, but we're going to hear one of those first, and right after that, we're going to hear a little bit from our very own Andrew Levin. So right now, here is Chainbrain.
Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Nice to see you. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Chainbrain, Canadian guy, born and raised Northern Ontario. Now, chances are, if you've watched some Rocksmith on Twitch and or YouTube, you might have seen me floating around. I'm a big metalhead, do a lot of metal on the channels, and I would like to say thank you to the Rocksmith team for asking me to come play a couple of tracks for the live stream. Been looking forward to this since they asked me, so here we are. Now, the first song I've picked to play today is Crystal Mountain by Death. Now, this song is absolutely incredible. My favorite Rocksmith DLC, and this album was very important for me when I started learning how to play guitar. I found this album had the perfect mix of very aggressive, fast music, but really nice guitar melodies as well. And I find that's what I love about metal is, you know, hard-hitting riffs that sound really nice in your ear. So I am playing this on my Kiesel Delos custom 7-string. I am endorsed by Kiesel Guitars. Check them out. If you want to know anything more about or specific specs about the guitar, you can message me on Twitter or whatever. I love talking that kind of stuff. So anyways, let's get right into it here. I haven't played this one in a while. I hope I do okay. Oops. Not what I wanted. There we go. I remember trying to learn that riff as a kid with the tabs. Very difficult at the time. touch yourself. Cheating a little bit. Hmm. 97, not that bad. Did okay. Yeah, I remember printing out the guitar tabs, my mom yelling at me because I used all the printer paper and ink, printing out guitar tabs and trying to learn that song. And I'll tell you right now, it didn't go too well back in the day.
Exemplary performance.
All right, not bad. Right on.
What up, everyone? Andrew here, and I put together this quick guide of some basic things that you will need to start recording at home, and then a few tips on how to set that all up. So if you've never recorded before, this will definitely be for you. And even if you have some experience recording, hopefully some of these tips and tricks can be useful to you. So anyway, without further ado, number one thing that you're going to need is a computer. I'm guessing since it's 2020, you're watching this on Twitch, you play Rocksmith, you probably have a computer. But just wanted to briefly mention that you probably want a computer with at least 8 gigs of RAM. 2005, 2006, when I started recording and posting my sad songs on MySpace, I had like a 2 gig RAM computer with Sony Acid on it, and I was able to make some okay sounding recordings. But 2020, you want to have the headroom, especially if you want to use any VSTs. Definitely more RAM is better. So second thing you're going to need is an audio interface. I highly recommend going with the Focusrite Scarlett series if you don't already have an interface. The Scarlett 2i2, in my opinion, is totally worth spending the extra $50 on over the Scarlett Solo. That's because it has 2 mic inputs, so if you ever want to expand and record anything in stereo, like acoustic guitar, in my opinion, should always be recorded in stereo, you're gonna want to have that flexibility, and spending an extra $50 is worth it when, if you decide later you want to be able to record acoustic and you have to spend another $150, $200, $300 on a whole new interface. So definitely recommend going for that 2i2 as opposed to the Scarlett Solo. Apogee also makes some really great interfaces if you have a bit more of a budget. I, for the same reason, would recommend going for an Apogee Duet as opposed to an Apogee One. So the third thing you're going to need are monitors and stands. The KRK Rocket series is a really great first starter series for monitors. If you are in a smaller room like I'm in right now, you may want to go for a 5-inch as opposed to the 8-inch. The 8-inch is going to give you more bass response. They're more expensive. They sound great, and you probably won't need a subwoofer with them. But in a small room like I'm in, it's really easy for bass to get out of control. So smaller speakers might actually be better, and they're cheaper. Another one that I would really recommend are the Tannoy Reveal series. I got my Tannoys, that's what I'm using right now, a long time ago, and they're actually the 501. Tannoy, that's discontinued. They're using the 502s now. They have a bit more high-end, high frequencies than the Rockets do. So as long as you're aware of that, you can get some pretty good sounding mixes with them. So the next thing that you're going to need is some sort of stand to raise the speakers up to ear height. You want the tweeters of your speakers, which are those little circles above the larger part of the speaker, to be right at your ear height. I have some fancy speaker stands, these ISO acoustics, but for years I used cinder blocks and pencil erasers to separate the speakers from the cinder block. So there's a lot of clever DIY solutions that you can make to raise your speakers up to ear height without having to spend $100 on speaker stands like I did. I just happen to like the way these speaker stands look, and they're kind of modular. They're a little more flexible. And then the next thing you're going to need for monitoring are headphones. I use these AKG K240s. They are super budget friendly. They're open back headphones, as opposed to closed back headphones, are going to give you a lot more mixing time because your ears will not get as fatigued. Closed back headphones are great for recording. And they're also great if you have a household or a room that you're recording in where there's a lot of background noise. Closed back headphones will help filter that out. But I always prefer to, or not always, but generally prefer to mix with open back headphones. Just to me, they sound a bit more realistic, and I can mix for longer period of time with them. Now the next thing that you're going to want to do is set your speakers up at the appropriate place. I am posting a video of what my studio looks like. You're going to want the speakers to be at an equilateral triangle, as I said, at your ear height. And ideally, you're going to want them to be equidistant from each wall. So if you notice in my picture, the right monitor is a bit farther in from my desk, and the left one is right at the edge. And that's because the left wall is closer to my desk than the right wall. That's just, my room is kind of funky. That's the only way I was able to make it work. So I just moved my right speaker in about 6 inches to make them equidistant, and then pointed them right at me. Now they sound pretty great. So next thing that you're probably going to want is some sort of mic. This is guitar focused. So I would recommend starting with an SM57 or an SM58. An SM58 is great because it has a pot filter on it. So you can also use it for vocals as a starter mic. But the SM57 is pretty much the exact same mic, but it doesn't have a pot filter. So if you want to record vocals with an SM57, you can just buy a pot filter for real cheap, put that on there, and record vocals with it. So I think that's a really, really great place to start. Another great starter mic, if you want to start with vocals, is this mic that I'm using right here. This is a Rode NT1A. It's a condenser mic. Highly recommend it if you're on a budget and you want to record high quality sounding vocals. It's also good for acoustic instruments. So the next thing that you're going to need is a DAW. If you have a Mac, while Macs are more expensive, it allows you to have GarageBand or Logic. Logic is $200. In my opinion, that is a stupidly good deal. I'm a Logic user. I love Logic. The amount of built-in instruments that you get in Logic for $200 is totally enough you could record an entire album with it, and it would sound high quality, and you wouldn't even need any third-party plugins. If you want to record guitar direct into Logic, the amp models sound pretty decent. The synths in it sound really good. The plugins sound really good. So I would highly recommend Logic if you have a Mac. Ableton is also great. as is Cubase, but they're more expensive. Now, Logic won't run on a PC, so if you have a PC, I would recommend starting with Ableton or Cubase. Again, because of the built-in instruments and writing functionality. Now, Pro Tools is the industry standard when it comes to mixing, and it's great, but it's not my favorite when it comes to home recording and production. It's really good for post-production for videos, and it's really great if you're mixing 100 tracks and you're in a high-budget studio, but for starters, I would not recommend it. Sixth thing that you're going to need is a MIDI controller, so that you can play instruments on your computer. I really recommend getting something with some knobs and some pads to play around with. The Akai MPK Mini is a great starting point on a budget there. And if you want to expand upon that, the whole MPK series plays well and has a lot of functionality. Final thing I want to mention is depending on the room that you're in, you may need to do some work on it. You don't have to go all fancy like I did with all these sound panels, but even just putting a carpet down if you're in a room with hardwood floors can make a world of difference. And if you want to get deeper into this, you can look up how to sound treat your room for cheap. The most important thing are bass traps and some sort of high frequency absorption. If you guys are interested in that, I can come up with a video that deals with that a little bit later. So anyway, that's about it. And I hope that you found that useful, and let me know if you have any questions.
And welcome back to a live portion of this week's Rocksmith Developer Stream. I am your host and community manager, Doug Lilly. I don't think I introduced myself earlier. It's fine. I'm glad you're all still here with us. We've got one more song from Chainbrain coming up, but right now we'd like to do a giveaway. We've got 5 copies of the Rage Against the Machine song pack on Steam to give away. So if you're in the chat, please listen to You Be Drastic once more. That is Brian Turner. He is our community manager in North Carolina. He will tell you how you can win one of these 5 copies of the Rage Against the Machine song pack on Steam. In that pack, we've got Bomb Track, Killing in the Name, Know Your Enemy, and Wake Up, all from Rage's 1992 self-titled debut album. So those can be yours. Please listen to You Be Jurassic for your chance to win a copy. Right now, once more, very pleased again to have Chainbrain with us, and he's going to do one more track, and then we've got a little bit of stream news after that. So please stick around, and we'll see you then.
All right, so second track we are playing today is Trivium, A Gunshot to the Head of Trepidation. Now, this is another very important album for me when I started, getting into heavier music. Same thing as I said about the Death song, really heavy riffs in this one, but really nice guitar leads, really nice, like, dual guitar. They kind of got like an Iron Maiden dual guitar thing going on in here. I've also been pretty heavy into Trivium lately. I don't know if you guys are very active on Twitch, but Matt Heafy of Trivium and the rest of the guys from Trivium as well have been streaming quite heavily and hanging around in different music kind of streams, and they've been really supportive of the Rocksmith channels as well, which is really cool to see. So I thought I'd play a little bit of Trivium for you guys. All right, let's go. I've already done the drop tuning. Cinema Magic. Let's go. All right, gets a little bit difficult here. There better be some haze in the chat right now. Tried to do a pinch harmonic on the last note there, but it totally slipped out of my finger. Anyways, 94%, not that bad. Absolutely incredible track. I hope you all enjoyed it. Now listen, if you guys are looking to join me on Twitch or YouTube here, just Google Chainbrain and all shall be revealed. I think it might also show you a bicycle shop in Australia, but that's not me. The rest of the stuff on there, you'll find me. Thanks for watching.
Just making it look easy. Thank you so much, Chainbrain, for being our performer this week. It's great to finally have you on the stream. I want to give you too big of a head, but me and the voice in my ear, we're very complimentary during both of the sets. So great job. Thank you again. Hey, let's do one last giveaway. Ernie Ball prize pack. We're doing our second of two. For this week. Once more, please listen to UB Jurassic in the chat. That is our community manager in North Carolina, Brian Turner. He will let you know how you can win everything that you see upon your screen. You're going to get 2 sets of strings for Ernie Ball, one for your guitar, one for your bass, assuming those are 6 and 4 stringers respectively. You're going to get a black Ernie Ball guitar strap. You're going to get a package of Ernie Ball picks, the Ernie Ball Wonder Wipes. Keep your guitar's body, neck, and strings looking fresher, lasting longer. I've heard tasting better, but I wouldn't try it. And also a peg winder from Ernie Ball. All that can be yours as soon as I'm able to get back into the studio to send those out, which shouldn't be too long from now. It's becoming a bit more of a regular occurrence, maybe, if twice can be regular. So yeah, good luck on those. Again, please listen for instructions from UB Jurassic to let you know how you can win those. If you win, you're going to get a whisper from UB Jurassic. He's going to get your name, your shipping address, and your telephone number. We do need all of that information in order to send your prize to you. And if you are outside of the U.S., addresses outside of the United States confuse me. So please break them up line by line to make them easier on me, so I know how your local area formats their addresses and it doesn't get sent to the wrong country, because I would hate for that to happen. So yeah, thank you again, Chainbrain, for being here. Thank you so much to Greg Studley for putting together that conversation about the major scale and major chords. Thank you to Dan Emmerich, the voice in my head, who's running the board for everything. And thank you all for being here. Thanks to Chainbrain for bringing along some friends. It's nice to have you here as well. And it's always nice to have our regulars. Speaking of always nice to have our regulars, this stream, we are moving to YouTube. So this will be our final stream for the foreseeable future on Twitch. We'll be moving to YouTube. That'll be on the normal Rocksmith game page on YouTube. We will make sure to blast all the information about when we're going to be and where. Same time, just different place. But that'll all be on our social media. So please check us out on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Rocksmith Game, just like our YouTube page. And then on Facebook, just facebook.com/Rocksmith. That will get you all there. We hope that you will join us on YouTube. We hope to see you there. And we hope we'll probably have some growing pains. So if nothing else, that should be fun to watch. But yeah, we're going to move over there. And we hope to see you then soon. Again, thank you for joining us. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.